there's been a wholesale walking away from the traditional beliefs of our society, that is to say, Christianity. Far from producing liberation, it's producing, it seems, oppression and unhappiness. And so in part what you're saying is that we've broken away from the idea of males as, protectors, providers, procreators, and having some special responsibilities. That was supposed to be liberating. It's turned out not to be liberating. Why is it, in your view, that the decline of Christianity has produced exactly the opposite of what its advocates have said it would?
Well, I would say it's because Christianity is true and therefore it fits reality. If you're living according to a view that's true, then you're living in line with reality. And so I would argue that, just go back to the basic biology. When I was writing my book, again, one of the most common questions I got was, well, then what do you think are the differences between men and women? Because, today, if you say there's any differences, you get jumped on, even on issues like, transgender people in women's sports. I have literally seen feminists saying, well, women would be just as strong with men if they would just work harder. They would just work out more. No, I'm sorry. Basic biology says, men are bigger, stronger, faster. They have 75% more upper body muscle mass. They have 90% greater upper body strength. They have more fast twitch muscles. That was a word I had to learn. It just means they can react more quickly. And because of testosterone, they are, in fact, more aggressive. On general, on average, more aggressive and more risk-taking than women. And I think it's time for us to just say, this is the creational givens, right? This is what God made men to be. It's basic biology. And we have to find a way to say these are good. The way that God originally created men is good. And the way God created women is good. One reason that women are sometimes resistant to acknowledging the differences is because as soon as you acknowledge a difference, you tend to think one is less than. That's just human, right? One is going to be less than. So we have to be very careful that when we talk about men's strengths, we talk about women's strengths. Women's superpower is that they have children. And they also tend to test out higher on tests of emotional intelligence. By the way, they've been testing out higher on IQ tests, too, for the last 12 years or so, which is interesting. But the fact is that having children does, in fact, make women it increases their emotional sensitivity. After all, an infant, and by the way, Jordan, you mentioned Jordan Peterson, so he talks about this. Having an infant is extremely demanding. They need things 24 hours a day. And no matter what you're doing, if an infant's in distress, you don't scold them. You don't tell them to wait until you're done with what you're doing. You don't reason with them. You meet the distress, no matter what you wanted to be doing. And so it creates an incredible sense of being willing to adapt to and acknowledge and respond to another human being. And of course, mothers take on the risk to their babies. These babies are very helpless and vulnerable. And so mothers have to be very sensitive to threats in their environment. They have to become mama bears. And so we have to acknowledge that women's strengths are also strengths. And acknowledging differences shouldn't be threatening because we should be able to say both of them are positives. And both of them are part of the created order that, this is pre-fall, right? This is how God originally made people. And therefore, we have to say this is basically good. Obviously, it can be distorted and it has been distorted. But we have to kind of get back to what's the ideal? Because if you don't have an ideal, you don't know what you're working for. And so we have to acknowledge, start with just basic biology. And a lot of our psychological and social trends build off biology. Like, for example, because women are the ones who are pregnant and nursing and carrying babies in a sling on their back, women tend to find work closer to home, always have. And so even today, when women get pregnant and have children, they're more likely to cut back on their work. So we should say, well, this is good. We want parents who are deeply engaged and committed to their children and raising them. And so all that to say, even our social and psychological aspects are often governed by or shaped by the biology. So let's just start with the basic biology and say these are good gifts. each of the sexes brings something good to the. It's like I use the analogy of the violin and the cello, since I play the violin. A cello and a violin playing a duet. You can see the differences, but they're playing in harmony, and it's beautiful.